Hello, welcome everybody. This is a rare, unusual live, meaning we're not really live. We had a last minute scheduling conflict, so we ended up pre-recording it. And I'm going to hop on in the chat with you at 2 o'clock if I don't have to call my dad back, which I might have to. But then we can all chat in the comments because I know everyone's really excited about today's guest. So before I get that started, just a little bit of quick business. For those of you who have emailed me to ask me about the retreat affinity that's coming up, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter. Just go to pattylyons.com because the pre-registration opens on March 18th. And the last 3 years, we sold out from the pre-registration. So you don't want to miss it. Okay, blah, blah, blah. You're like, get to the guest. I know, I feel you. I totally feel you because that's right. We're here to talk about unraveling. I know the world exploded when we all saw a little New York Times article that actually wrote about knitting in an intelligent way. We are very, we're like abuse victims who are so used to seeing knitting in a newspaper and thinking, okay, it's going to be stupid. It's going to call crochet knitting. It's going to call knitting crochet. It's going to say things like, it's the new yoga, or not just for old ladies anymore, or any one of the 8 million tropes that we cannot stand. So then we see this article and we're like, what? It's written intelligently. I don't understand. Let me look at the byline. Oh, Peggy Orenstein. Okay, now I know why it's written intelligently. So yeah, we're pretty excited because oh, you know what? I'm gonna never mind. I'm just talking to myself to say this thing that I'm doing is not going to work, so I'm going to stop doing it. I had a backup recording going, but I just realized why that's not going to work. But anyway, we are so excited, and I know who's we. It's just me, but we, meaning all of you guys, to welcome the one and only. The crowd goes wild. Peggy Orenstein, author of Unraveling. Hello.
Wait, I want to challenge something you just said.
What?
You write intelligently about knitting. Come on.
No, I'm not talking. No, I'm not a newspaper. I'm not talking about humans in the industry that
I
write.
see. Okay.
I'm talking about the anytime we see an article in the newspaper, in a magazine,
Yeah.
a news story on a local news channel, it's going. Here's the buckets it's going to fall into. Men knit. There's that bucket number one. Look at the man. Look at the man. Oh, he knits. Right. To which I always want to say, oh, look, she's a lady and she knows math. Right. Yeah. So there's that.
Like,
oh, did you give me a thumbs up? There was
I didn't mean to, but it happened.
A thumbs up came up. That was exciting.
How did that happen? I don't know how that happened.
I don't know. That's
It
pretty
on its own. Zoom.
That was very exciting. So there's that. There's the article that was written during Rhinebeck of like the new breed of knitter. Look, they're young.
Right.
Okay, well, Rhinebeck's been going on for 30, 40, Rhinebeck sheep and wool, I've lost track, a lot of years. Which means, hi, the old ladies like me that are going now, guess what we were when we started going? Young. So it's that. Yeah. So that article, that in case you were wondering, like, why did this article break the internet?
Yeah.
That's why. We're so, our bar is set very low for anyone writing intelligently about our craft. So when we feel seen by someone, and then we find out that someone is us, it's one of us, which we didn't know. Like, I didn't know that. I've known your work for years. I didn't know. It you know.
Oh, that's really nice.
It was a moment.
It's so and I will say, I feel like I've hit it's been a hard book to promote for I think for that reason.
Yeah,
Um, people don't want I and I mean, granted, my other books have things like sex in the title that makes it easy, but I've been surprised by how difficult a sell to a degree this has been because and I did, I got that I didn't think the Times piece I got through, and that was a huge boon to that, but because people assume stupidity, basically, yeah, and I think, you can tell the history of the world through fiber, through textile, through I mean, people don't say if you write a book about how the history of the world is through salt, nobody says, "No, it's not." Of course it is. That was a great book.
right. That's
So,
right. Oh, I
I
didn't
think
think of it that way.
I also think, if I had written a book about baseball, if I had gone out and said, "I'm gonna learn how to," I don't know what you would do, but the equivalent of baseball, that I would not face that kind of stigma. I really do think I wasn't that I was surprised exactly because I could hear it whenever I said just while I was doing it, what I was doing to people, and they'd be kinda like, "Huh?" Um, but I really I didn't feel I should have to make the case for writing about knitting fiber, the whole process that I went through in a way that was both about it and also illuminated something beyond it and also, was political and all of these other things. It seemed so obvious to me
Yeah,
that
and to us, it is.
yeah, that it's like in the article that I say, I think people I want to both challenge the idea that it's just, a certain kind of person who knits and also say, so what if it was, Like what's wrong with me or you? Like we do some pretty damn cool things. So it's walking that line between
Yeah,
saying, well, it's not, being defensive. Well, it's not this. It's more than this. And also saying, and if it were just this, so what?
yeah. I write a column for MDK, Modern Daily Knitting, and it's like a Dear Abby for knitters. And I remember a couple of years ago, it was one of those emails that I got asking my advice of, what do you say when you get, X, Y, and Z, and it was that one of them was, uh, it's not your grandmother's knitting, and I said it literally is.
It is. It
It
is totally a great. And
literally.
what is wrong with that? That is
That's
a
what I said in
beautiful,
the
beautiful
column.
thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what
I
I said
mean,
in the
the
column.
fact that this links us or, in our stitches, in our threads to women from 20,000 years ago or
Yeah,
something is brilliant.
yeah.
And so it just I don't know, it's ageism and sexism kind of,
All
joining.
rolled into a beautiful bonbon of stupidity. It really is.
Yeah.
Um, and the thing about that thread that connects us, another thing that always blows my mind is that there's only a handful of uh, not only crafts, just a handful of things, anything, where the tools have fundamentally never changed.
Mhm.
Knitting, glass blowing,
Oh,
glass blowing. The tools are a wooden spoon, wet newspaper, a metal pipe. I mean, they're really fundamentally has not changed. There's the ovens have gotten, nicer, but not really. Like, yeah. So I think the
you
fact
do
that our
glass blowing?
tools, pardon?
Do you blow
Oh
glass?
God, no. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. I love
Oh,
watching it. And I've often wondered about why, what is it about it? It appeals to me. I mean, fire, I like fire. I have a thing with fire, but I do like the fact that the tools have never changed.
that's interesting.
Find that fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, the sheep shearing thing, it was interesting to me to learn that, they've not been able to successfully mechanize that,
Right.
which is very cool. It has to be, I mean, it's done, there's electricity now, so that's different, but it's done by hand. It has to be
Right.
done by hand.
And
That's,
it is a sight to see. A dear friend of mine, the woman in the video that I sent you,
mhm.
Tabitha, who is runs Long Island Yarn and Farm, who is the shearer in that video. Watching her work is, amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, and I love the watching first the connection with the animal, like looking that they look the
Yeah.
animal in the eye. There's a little like I'm here. It's okay. You with me? Okay, let's do this. And that part of the book was the
Yeah.
part that was the hardest for me to wrap my brain around, because the one I had two beginning questions. One
Uh,
you touched on, so I'm going to go back to that, and then I have a sharing question. The first thing I thought when I read this was, often I'll see a movie or a TV show and I'll think, like Severance, and I think, okay, what was that pitch meeting like? So
yeah.
when I read this book, I was like, what was that book proposal like? And how was that received? So was it pushing a boulder up a hill, or were they like, "Eh, we trust you"?
It was weird. So I've this the sheep shearing thing. It's interesting. I did an event in Santa Rosa, California, recently, and the woman who is the main character, the kind of hero in Girls and Sex, came. She lives up there, and she raised her hand at the end. She said, "You know, when you were following me around in 2012, you kept talking about how you wanted to shear sheep." And I said, "I did?" And she said, "Yeah, you've totally been wanting to do this." And I knew I'd wanted to do it for a long time, but I didn't kinda it's been like a bee in my bonnet, and I've thought for a long time, "Oh, if I could find a way to learn how to do that, it would make an interesting article for, like, the Smithsonian or something about understanding, where our fiber comes from and how we've lost this connection." I because I'm interested in those connections. I've long been interested in that kind of connection. I haven't necessarily written about it, but I've been personally interested in it. Um, so I didn't think it was going to be a book, but I did have this idea for an article for a long time. And then when lockdown happened, I had just had a book out. I just had Boys and Sex out. I was just getting to the transition from where you do your book tour to where you start doing, formal speaking engagements around the country. Um, and all those evaporated. Everything evaporated. I had no work. I had nothing to do. I'm sitting there terrified, like all of us, not knowing how long this is going to go on. And I always, when I proposed, and I didn't have any ideas of things that I could do. I couldn't do the kind of reporting I normally do, which is very travel intensive and face to face, and
Mm.
I didn't feel like it would work over Zoom, and I was kind of hysterical. And I was thinking about this, and I've always proposed like a couple books when I propose a book, and so usually
At a
it's
time?
well, I don't do them both. It's like, do you want me to do this one or this one?
Oh,
And
yikes.
so this one is usually like this big sort of big reporting, labor intensive thing. And then the other one tends to be a little quirky. So I've had a long thing where I wanted to write about my family history and the history of the this my family were Jewish homesteaders in North Dakota, which has a whole like
Oh, you
who did
gotta write that.
but it's well, I now it's kinda too late because everybody died, and I don't know the story well enough, but there
Mm.
was a reason why they were there, and that whole reason I thought would make a great book, and they always say, "Yeah, that's really interesting. How about girls and sex?" You know? Great idea, boys and sex, So this one, I didn't have another book, but I said
And
to
sheep and sex never occurred to you.
no.
Okay.
But I was talking to my agent and I said, kind of in a voice like I just said, well, I had this kind of one idea. And I like, 'cause I thought they're in New York City. They're just gonna laugh at me. Um, but it was right, it was shortly after lockdown and everybody was baking sourdough and
It's
discovering
true.
it after. And so it felt like it was like the zeitgeist. They were
Mm.
like, "Oh, this is a great," and I was stunned. I really never thought they would say, I thought they would just go, "Sure, honey. Yeah," and then I thought, "Well, maybe I can do it somehow in some other form as a magazine article or figure something out," but I was kind of shocked that
Yeah.
they didn't even, it wasn't even hard. They just said, "That's a great idea. That fits the time really well." The hard part was that it was like March or something, and that's not sheep shearing season,
Right.
so, um, figuring out how to do it and not knowing, like, if we thought lockdown was gonna last, like, a few weeks, right? So, I
You
didn't
know,
really have a sense that I was gonna be there for a year with nothing to do, so
this whole thing started, this whole live situation started, uh, uh, it was originally called Quarantine Live. And
Oh,
I have a teeny tiny apartment in Brooklyn. And when my husband, bye, David, was heading out the door to Subway, get to Subway to work, got a text, don't come in. In fact, don't come back at all. And he was like, I need to pick up my stuff. No, don't. So it was that fast. And
yeah.
in New York, it had that feeling of like I mean, it's really weird to say out loud now because it makes me sound like a crazy person, but you have to remember, you have to imagine what it was like to be in New York City at the epicenter of the epicenter and
Yeah.
understand how little we knew about what was coming. We thought, are the bridges going to be shut down? Are we not going to be allowed in or out? I mean, I know that sounds like
Oh,
really
I remember that. Yeah.
wackadoo, but so we have this house upstate, and we thought we'll throw some clothes in the bag, and we thought we would come up here for 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and then 2 years later,
You're still there.
yeah.
Yeah. I know.
So
It was and it's funny because, I mean, this well, and you said we were gonna get a little far afield, that's fine. Um, when I was writing the book, they sort of discouraged me from making it too pandemic-y, even though I was doing all of this while all as all that was going on, because they were worried that, nobody's gonna care about this by the time the book comes out.
I
It's
was
all
going
gonna
to ask
be
you
up in the rearview mirror, right?
I was going to ask you which extreme that was about. Was it about that? Ugh, it'll be over. We're
Yeah.
over that, or was it the other way, which is like we're going to be traumatized. We're not going to want to read it.
Well, it was kind of both. They were like, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to want to read anything about that, either because it's going to be over or because we're so traumatized. But I think the truth is that we do want to not maybe I don't want to read like a lot of science and stuff, but like that. I think that there was that Lucy by the Sea. I don't know if you read that novel, but
No,
uh,
but yeah, I've heard
who did
about it.
exactly, and she had a
Yeah,
husband, David, who that was kind of it. They were like, we're leaving right now, throw things in the bag, we'll be there for a few weeks in Maine. And and she's like, really? Oh, okay. And then 2 years later, there they are. I I think that
I'm
we're
waiting for Tony Kushner to take a crack at it and define our, which he won't be able to for 10 years, just
right.
the way he was able to define our entire, you know,
Yeah.
life through AIDS in
But I
this
think
tiny
people
4-hour play.
are trying to understand it. And I think, I'll see something. I'm trying to think of what I saw the other day. I can't remember something, some reference to something that everybody was doing. Oh, wait, I thought it was Tiger King. And I thought, oh God, Tiger King, my God. I mean, and it brings back like all this stuff
Yeah,
about what was going on then when everybody just went, oh God, oh God, oh God. Okay, Tiger King, like
we
that
we
was
we
crazy.
bailed after 2 episodes. We're like, this
And we
is too
didn't
much
watch it.
crazy.
My husband's a documentary filmmaker, and he was like, I am not watching this
Yeah, we
thing.
were like, we're out.
Um, yeah, but still, that was, like everybody just went, um, and it's interesting to think back about that. So I don't know, like originally in the title, which everybody hates the ugly thing, and I have reasons for that. But I had something about the pandemic in the title, and
In
that's
the title or the little subtitle?
in the subtitle thing. Yeah,
What, are you allowed to say what your original subtitle was?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
Remember there was something about the pandemic in it. I mean, like the year, or there was something about, it says something like what I learned while shearing sheep, but there was something like what I learned
Right,
during a pandemic of, there was something that referenced the pandemic, and
right.
they
In a
just went,
year of lockdown.
no.
But
Um,
so my
but
sharing question had to do with the lockdown. I wasn't I know that you talked about, YouTube videos and all that stuff, but I wasn't entirely clear. Uh, did you literally go from YouTube videos to a sheep between your legs? Was there
yeah,
nothing?
yeah.
So,
The answer to that is just yes. Yes, I did. Yes.
but in a non-COVID world, would that be the normal way that someone would, or are they
Um,
physically there and they're like watching the sharing and maybe someone's like, oh, try this part. Okay, no, go sit down.
I don't know. I don't know, but I had tried for several years. I had wanted to do this for a while, and there's one sheep shearing class in Mendocino, California, up north at the extension, UC extension. And it's a 5-day class. So I don't know what they're doing for 5 days. My teacher, Laura, was one of the teachers of that class, but obviously it wasn't happening.
Wait, you
So
mean you don't know what they're doing for 5 days because you think that's long or you think that's short? To me, that
oh,
sounds
I
just
think it's
short.
probably great, but I don't know if what they do is like sit there and watch somebody shear. I don't know how it goes. I've never done it, so I don't know. Like when they get to doing the sheep themselves, or if it's just that they do more sheep, or I don't really know what they do, how they teach them. But for me, yeah, I watched a lot of it, and I was so kind of blithe and naive about it. I was sort of like, they would I would see things like, "Oh, it's the hardest job in the world, and it burns twice as many calories per minute as marathon running," and, um, you know, um, all the things that you see about sheep shearing, and I think, "Yeah, no problem. I'm nearly 60 years old. Sign me up. I can do that." I just was like, "Woo," until I got there and realized what I was doing, and it's so I mean, as we know, does not hurt the sheep, crucial for their survival. They will die if they're not shorn. But it's like if you gave a toddler a haircut. You gotta do it, but they don't really like it. They're
Right.
not they don't go, "We." I mean, so if you know what you're doing, they feel that and they just kind of, relax into it. But when they've got somebody like me, they're like, "What's this chick doing?" And so then they think, "I can get away." And they're full of lanolin, so they're greasy. They outweigh me by quite a bit, and, they have hooves, and they kick, and you've got a hot whirring blade going
I know that's
with
the I
safety.
stop, stop.
It's hard. It's really, really hard, and at a certain point, Laura said to me after it took me an hour and a half to do my first sheep. It
I
takes her 2.5 minutes, and she said, "Wow, you've got a knack for this. Most
Oh,
people by now are either crying or cursing."
I
And
know, that was so sweet.
I would totally and I talked to her and she again said she hadn't read the book and she said, "Yeah, you really had a knack for that." I said, "I did not have a knack for it. I had to do it in order to get to write my book. And so I had to just suck it up and believe me, honey, if I hadn't had to do that, I would have been throwing that thing down and crying." And also I never threw the blade down, which
I
is
know, you can't you almost did.
because you
You
gotta
came
pay
close.
if you throw the blade. So I
Yeah,
was like,
20 bucks.
"Gotta do it." And I've got a lot of discipline as a journalist, much more than I do as a human being. So,
I can't remember how many times. At one point you said how many times in a set period you called stop because they told you
constantly,
to
like
say
every few
stop,
seconds at a certain yeah.
you know?
You want start, stop, and if
Yeah,
you drop your instinct because the sheep is, moving because it doesn't because you don't have good control,
yeah,
is throw the blade because it's hot, whirring, and sharp. But
yeah,
if you do, it breaks, and every time you do it, you pay 20 bucks.
yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I just didn't really wanna pay a couple $100 throwing the blade every couple minutes, so I made my I didn't do it. I
'Cause
never
you're
threw
like, "What if the book doesn't sell?" I mean, I don't know.
I know,
I can't go through my whole
my
advance
head
in blade.
scratched to just be
It's gonna be
throwing a
terrible.
blade on the ground, so I really didn't. I never did. I didn't throw it once.
So I'm amazed, but now actually less amazed that you explained about the why that your publisher wasn't like, "Hmm?" So that actually does make sense. But
It would have been if I'd proposed it before 2020.
I know that does make more sense. That does make more sense. But I was struck, and we talked a little bit about this before we hit record about um, how the people that have known you for years and know your work for years are approaching the work versus how people are approaching the work that have never heard of you. And they're like, oh, a lady wrote about
Uh,
sheep.
yeah,
Oh, I like Clara Parks books.
right,
I'll like this. And then, oh, there's other stuff in here. What? So
right.
it's an intriguing, you have there's this whole new audience. And
Yeah.
has that ever, in your career since you started, have you had another work like this where you feel like, oh, now I've got this whole new group of people that walk in the room? This is
Great
intriguing.
question. Well, I mean, in my magazine work, I've written about a lot of different kinds of things. I write travel pieces sometimes. I write, so I've had a generalist career, but my focus and what I'm best known for is writing about, the kind of politics of women and girls' ordinary lives. And so to that extent, and then, writing the books Girls and Sex and Boys and Sex were really the thing that,
And the TED Talk, I think, brought a lot of eyeballs into the
yes, I
field.
always forget about the
I
TED.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's because
Yeah,
that's
more people have known me from my TED Talk than any other thing
that
ever,
doesn't surprise
which
me.
is weird. I mean, I forget about it because it's something I didn't even know. I mean, as you know from trying to work with me on this technology stuff, I'm a little behind the curve. And when they asked me to do that, my response was kind of like, why would I do that? It's like I have to do work. I'm not getting paid. I have to. I wasn't going to do it. I said no. And
It's
then
the
I
whole
talked
thing.
to some friends, and they were like, Peggy, you do not turn down a TED Talk.
You don't.
And I thought, "But I have to, like, memorize it, I have to perform it, I don't wanna." Is it but so I did, and it ended up being between YouTube and TED, it's had, like, 5.8 million views, and,
I
um
mean, there's people like me that are, I listen to TED Talk Radio Hour.
yeah,
There's
but
like the
I mean,
hardcore TED
I'm very
talkers.
focused on being a writer, that's what I do, and, it's like being, like I say in the book, it's kind of like being at this point a blacksmith, it's a weird, it's, like, just so marginal, but, but but I will all the time, people will say, "Ah, your name's familiar, you look familiar," and I'll sort of say, "Well, I'm a writer," and they go, "Well, what do you write?" And then I'm like, "Ugh," and I kind of, like, list a few things, and they'll say, "No,
No, not
no,
that, not
no,"
that.
and I'm going, and then I'll say, "Oh, I did a TED Talk." That's it. So, it did, certainly raise my profile, but why did I start talking about that? Oh, because of the transition.
The new
So
people, that new audience that kind of
so,
finds you.
yeah, so, but I still think that this book is consistent in the sense that that is what interests me is looking beneath the hood of ordinary life and looking at what all that means. So looking at thinking about, I asked the question kind of early on, why don't we think about our clothing the way we think about our food?
Right.
About sustainability, about ethics, about all these things. And and I, didn't really, but or what, I think maybe we were talking about this before we started, but the ways that textile, first of all, you can sell the whole world, the history of the world through fiber, through textiles, through knitting. I mean, it was fascinating through color. Um, and that you also have this thread that links women through tens of thousands of years of
Yeah.
history and all of that. I mean, that's me all over. That is
And
what I,
all around the world. I mean,
yeah, all around
it's
the
not
world.
even like a thing that connects you to generations of through your culture,
Right.
through your
Through
country,
every
through
culture. It is,
yeah,
it's the most amazing thing. And so, that is so consistent with who I am as a person and what I do as a writer, that I don't see the conflict at all, but obviously other people are like, "You went from sex to knitting, ha, ha, ha." And I have, been at events that I haven't done a lot of events because they don't really do them anymore after the pandemic, but the ones that I have done has been, I say, like, how many of you, how many of you have shorn a sheet? How many of you have spun? How many of you, are natural dyers? How many of you knit? How many of you have read any of my other books? And it's surprising. I mean, there are people there who have, but it's not a lot of people haven't, and it's really exciting to get that new audience.
yeah,
Uh, and I don't know. I've got layers.
yeah. Because I always remind people uh, who get upset or are insulted if, kind of famous people, if someone hasn't heard of them, and I say, no, be excited. That
Yeah.
means you haven't hit that, the well's not dry. You haven't
Well,
hit the bottom of the well.
famous, so
You know,
but
like that's a good thing, not a
yeah, I
not a
mean,
bad thing.
I feel like I'm known
Um,
in a very particular world, and it is, I mean, the thing that is challenging then, and this was very challenging with Girls and Sex, was, doing the Boys and Sex not so much, but you're going into a new world, and people don't know who you are, and, like, who are you? And you've gotten kinda used to being in your old world where everybody knows who you are, so and that's a privilege,
yeah.
and so it's a humbling, but it's very good. I mean, I'm, I'm just curious. I always say, like, I feel like, being a writer means for better or for worse, I've gone to school for my whole life, and gotten to choose what I study.
What you didn't answer when I emailed you, to say, "Are you gonna do Rhinebeck, and do you want me to connect you with
Oh,
your books?" Because you've got to do Rhinebeck Sheep and Wool. Gotta do it.
I'm gonna try.
It's
I have not,
so fun.
I know, I really wanna go.
And the author tent, they run a really, the bookstore, Merit Books, runs a
Oh,
fabulous author. They're who runs the author tent. They
oh,
do a
okay.
fabulous job, absolutely spectacular job. So
It would
we'll
be super
talk.
fun. I mean, I really wanna, yeah, I'd really like to do that.
Yeah, it's a great event. But
Way across the
I,
country, but yeah.
the whole thing about the famous and different, my because every once in a while I'll be somewhere with my brother, or I think it happened once with my father, where someone will recognize me and say, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to bother you. Were you Patty Lyons?" My brother thinks I'm famous,
Uh-huh.
and I have to explain I'm moderately well known. I'm a medium to medium to largish fish in the world's tiniest pond. Like that's the only way I can put it. Like I'm not even a big fish in a tiny pond. I'm a
Well,
fish
I
who has
know a lot of
people.
people who were excited about my talking to you, who are impressed that I know you. So there you go.
Well, I'm a fish that knows some people. But there was so. I mean, I joked with you in the email of like, how could I not want to talk to another 50 something Jewish curly haired woman who knits? And you corrected me on one point, but anyway, um, there was so there's a lot in this book that is, kind of right out of my life. I mean, some of it a little too close to the bone to even talk about, but then there were a lot of, hilarious things. Like before we recorded, for all you curly haired viewers out there, we talked about the need for a hospice hair care box, with instructions on how to deal with our hair. And there were just I I wrote a million notes of things that, like, every time I came across something, I'm like, oh my God, this. And now there's so many, it's like filling my brain. But have you experienced that when you're talking to other people, particularly of either maybe not even the same age, but have you come across that when you're being interviewed by people, when you're meeting people, that everyone has their list of, oh, and this, oh, and this, oh, and this, that rings a bell for them?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it has been this book meeting. I'm sad that I couldn't do more events because meeting people has been just an incredible joy, and the stories that they share, when I've done readings and signings have been, of connection, of their parents. I do a lot with this theme of she learned from her mom in the book. I start abbreviating it SLFHM. She learned from her mom. Yeah,
And there was the
because
one person
everybody
you
did.
met that didn't.
Yeah, except for when they didn't, and their grandmothers were, or and a lot of people do. I did, but then I also start playing with the idea of what we learn from our mothers that we are happy about, what we learned from our mothers that we wish we hadn't, what for those of us who have daughters and are now mothers ourselves, we want our daughters to learn from our mothers, and what we're hoping they won't.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so a lot of people kind of pick up on that. There's a lot in there about, well, my relationship with my mom, because which I was less. I mean, with every book, it's a braid, right? And I knew the braid of the tasks I was doing, but really nothing else. And I didn't know how much I was going to end up writing about my dad, who was he's died now, but he was 94 when I did the book, and in
yeah,
a facility in Minneapolis, had dementia. And one of the things that was really great was when I was sitting there and carding, which, is the most boring thing in the world, like so boring. Um, and I would just sit there and on FaceTime with him because it was hard to talk to him on the phone. He has hearing impairment,
right.
has dementia, and we could just be. And he would be watching the Twins game in Minneapolis on TV, the fantasy series, the reruns where they always win, which he thought was something he was doing with his walker, that he wouldn't tell me because he said it was a trade secret. I
Yeah,
was like, "Hey, Dad, great."
which I apparently he took to the grave. Yes,
Took to the grave. He took to the grave. Um,
it's commitment,
he would
man.
sing, and but it allowed me to slow down in this way and not, go through this whole guilty day that it was like, okay, I'm going to call him in an hour on the phone. I'm going to talk to him on the phone. I'm going to talk to him on the phone. I don't know. Now he's probably sleeping. I don't want to do now. It's, because it's so hard and it's so painful that even though you want to do it, you should do it and you're a good daughter and all that, you kind of go, "Ugh." So now that he has died, that time that we spent, those weeks where I just sat with him on
Yeah,
FaceTime, they are so precious to me. And I think that, that was a gift of partly of doing that kind of ancient work, was that it's a slow thing. It's not a technological thing. And that's a beautiful thing to have in your life, at least for a little while. So a lot of people related to the part about parents,
right.
there was a lot of people, and just, or even, their own mothers. One guy told me that his mother is alive in her 90s, has dementia, but the one thing she can still do is knit. And she knits 8 hours a day, and he
Yeah,
said the hard thing was keeping her in fiber. Like, he had to buy a lot of yarn for her because she was fast and did it, but if she didn't have it, she just devolved.
Well, my mom's an OT and an occupational therapist, and mostly she worked in child development. But and my grandpa was a doctor. But the what we've learned about the brain has changed so much.
Yeah.
And there was a stroke victim that was a crocheter many years ago. This was when first of all we used a food group to refer to certain stroke victims, if you feel me, which we
Oh,
don't use
yeah.
anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and so, first of all, what we knew about where memory was stored,
Right.
one brain's ability to take over for another was another
Uh-huh.
big thing that we actually learned from someone that had severe epilepsy and had a one hemisphere removed. And then he started developing speech. So that was and that was just recently. We learned a whole
Mhm.
slew of things. But the crocheter, um, there was not the deep understanding of the difference between short-term memory, long-term memory, and where muscle memory lives.
Mhm.
We have now, and it was a daughter that would sit by the bedside of her mother, who was, told she is in a persistent vegetative state,
Mhm.
which she wasn't. She was in there, and but one day her daughter was bored, and she brought crochet, and she said
Oh,
her mother just
wow.
looked at her in a
Wow.
way that, and so the daughter kind of shrugged and thought, okay. And she handed her the yarn and the hook. And by the way, they thought the motion, no motion.
And she crocheted.
Yeah, she started crochet. I mean, if you
Mhm.
think about what we know about
Yeah.
music through Oliver Sacks,
Right,
his
right,
book,
right.
and the famous
Exactly.
story of the
And
choral
with my
conductor.
dad, I mean, he knew every lyric of every song he'd ever sung, but he didn't know, that he'd been a lawyer, and I mean, it was
Music's in a
that reminds
totally
me of, we know all these things about handwork and depression and meditative state and all this kind of stuff. I was on a call-in show, and this woman called in and said that she had attached electrodes to herself and measured the alpha waves when she was knitting, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And then she hung up, and I thought, "Wait a second. Where'd you get electrodes? Why do you have that machine in your house? Who
probably,
was that person?"
well, she's probably a scientist who's stuck home with COVID and was like, I'm going to
I
experiment
I
myself.
didn't I know, 'cause you're, like, in your mode, and I didn't think to go, "What?"
But that has been, so there was
Yeah,
another famous study years ago, testing right and left
yeah,
hemisphere, and they were looking for things that are equally balanced. So they were going to study the crawl
uh-huh, uh-huh,
swimmers, and they were going to wire up the brain of swimmers. But there was one of the scientists was a knitter, and she said, "Well, what about garter stitch?
yeah,
Both of our hands are moving; it's equally balanced." And
yeah.
so they also, because it's a non-dominant handed craft. Crochet is a dominant handed craft, but really
Oh,
both of your hands are moving in.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've taught knitters with no right hand. I've taught knitters with no left hand.
Uh-huh,
You only
that's
need the one hand,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
you know, but uh, yeah. I mean, the when you watch when if you go to Japan and you watch monks with prayer beads,
uh-huh,
or Catholics with the rosary,
uh-huh,
they're moving an item from left to right. They're moving an
yeah,
item from left to right. They're moving an item from left to right. They're moving an item from left to right. It's garter stitch, man.
interesting.
That's all it is garter stitch. That's
Yeah,
all we're doing.
yeah,
We're passing through our fingertips
yeah,
one item from left to right, left to right, left to right.
yeah. Interesting,
It's called
interesting.
garter stitch. Oh, the
Yeah,
other thing, speaking of passing through our fingers. So in the spinning section, you
yeah,
didn't mention this, and I had to ask you. Um, I wrote a blog many years ago called about spinning, about it being a metaphor for life. I was terrible. My friend tried to teach me. I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible. And I called her in tears. I couldn't draft. I couldn't draft. It
mhm,
wasn't moving. And
yeah,
she said, "Let me come over and I'll watch you do it." And I'm tugging and nothing will come out. Nothing will come out. She puts her hands on my hands and she says, "Release your grip a
uh-huh.
little bit." So spinning being a metaphor for life, nothing would move because I
Mm.
could not release my grip enough
Patty, I should have known you. I do
to
talk
have.
about how, I have a death grip on it, and you do have to learn. I loved spinning. I love
I love spinning
the
too.
wheel. I don't like spinning with a drop spindle.
I
I
have a
learned
Lendrum because I'm short, and that's a
um,
beautiful wheel. I had the Golding Ring spindle when I first learned, which has a metal around the
uh-huh,
outside, and
yes,
so it helps with the centrifugal force.
uh-huh,
But I
uh-huh,
dropped it all the time.
uh,
I was
yeah,
always dropping it.
I found drop spindling doing using a drop spindle very confusing, but I love using a wheel, but it's a long time if you're using, undyed roving. Well, I mean, if you start with fleece, it's a really long time, but it's a long
If
time
you
till you
start with
get
a sheep, it's even longer.
yeah. But somebody just sent me, this was actually another one of these really sweet stories. This girl that I met when she lived in Florida. She was 15 years old. She read Schoolgirls, my first book when it came out in 1994, and wrote to me back then with a letter with a stamp. And I wrote back, she wrote back, I wrote back.
It's the
Flash
Instagram thing you
forward.
just put.
Hmm?
Did you just write a story? Did you just write a post about this on
I did
Instagram?
write a post about her.
I saw
Yeah.
this. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So she, flash forward, she, I forgot this part. My daughter was a flower girl in her wedding. Um, my first cousin's daughter was her maid of honor. I had forgotten that because I had introduced them because they had both moved to New York after college when they were the same age, and they became best friends. And and so we went to her wedding in Florida, and now she's in her 40s. She's married, she's got a kid, she's a journalist, she works at Southern Living, and her aunt, who was at the wedding, who I met at the wedding, got in touch with me and said that her daughter, so my friend Lisa's first cousin, um, has a fiber store in Ohio, and she sells yarn, but she also dyes roving, and she wanted to send me some. So I
It
where
was
did it go?
beautiful.
I moved it.
Oh,
It was
do you have it here? Oh, because
okay. Yeah, I just moved it. Actually.
I saw the picture that you put on. Hold on, I'm getting the picture.
Let me grab it. Here's some of it. Da, 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 da,
And
da.
one of them's got like oh yeah, that's the blue one. And then the one with one's got that like a little bit of a sparkle to it. The
Yeah, they're
bottom
just
one.
gorgeous, and they're
Yeah,
so
those are good.
beautiful, and they're silk, and it's from can I say who she is? Is that all right? It's
Oh yeah, but what can you promote a friend? No. Yes,
Gwen. She's Gwen Aaron, Erin,
nice.
Nash,
Yeah, it's
National
really pretty.
Fibers in Hubbard, Ohio, and it's Blueface Leicester, which is what I used for learning. It was really good to learn spinning on because it's a long staple, a good size staple, and silk, and just comb top, and I'm
I've
really
never
excited.
spun silk, but I think as a blend, I
Yeah, I actually never have either, but I don't know what that, but it feels so yummy,
yeah.
and so I'm really excited, and I love because it's already dyed, so I won't have. I mean, dyeing is fun, but it also is one you. I want to. Ultimately, I'm a knitter, so I kind of want to get to the knitting.
You want to get to it, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw that when I hit the thing in the book about the Angora, it made me laugh because it's so soft, it's so fluffy and soft. And I went to a farm where the each little Tupperware full of Angora has the picture of the bunny, and then you can go like, "Come on down, let's meet them." And there
yeah.
they are. There's the bunnies. But I said, "Oh, is this hard to spin?" And she said, "Are you a good spinner?" I said, "No, not really." She said, "Mm, mm, let me show you this wool blended with a little Angora." And I said,
Oh,
"Oh, so that's too hard to spin?" She's like, "Well, you just said you weren't good." So it's
okay.
very because it's just this short, it's just fluff,
Yeah, it's really short.
short,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But the other thing that killed me in the I can't remember whose mother said it to me or where I heard it, but the thing about the Nazis in the Angora that you write in
Yeah.
the book, and a thing with our people is like, oh, you don't do the wedding march because um, that's not what we do. Uh,
Yeah.
and oh, Wagner or
Yeah.
Volkswagen and all the things. And who I know I'm trying to remember who I read this. It was somebody's mother. Oh, was it Edgar? Oh, it was Edgar. Edgar Carrot. It was his mother.
Uh-huh.
They were doing all his mother's stories. He's just a brilliant writer, and his mother loved Wagner, and of
Uh-huh.
course they're Jewish, and she would always get flack for it. And she said, you know what? Nazis liked apples. I like apples. And that just killed me. I just,
Yeah, that Nazi thing with the Angora was so interesting. But it was
yeah,
also so the thing is that the not they used Angora to they had a whole project and they used it as lining for the elite Air Force
and I
um
didn't know any of that.
jackets. Yeah, it's obscure and they kept the bunnies in the concentration camps in these beautiful in hutches with tons of room and these scientific diets. So while they're over here, starving, torturing, and killing people, they are treating these bunnies like, I don't know, honored guests.
Like bunny kings.
Yeah, it was pretty disturbing. I mean, obviously it was pretty disturbing, but um wait, I forgot. No, I was gonna say what was really interesting. Oh, what was the thing that was interesting to me about that was that the person who discovered that was this woman in Wisconsin, um, who was from Wisconsin, who was a war photographer, and there were not a lot of women who were doing that.
Right.
So like, her whole history, it's sort of like I saw that spinners will talk about Gandhi a lot because Gandhi, and I write this in the book too,
Yep.
Gandhi, because of the um, colonization and exploitation of the cotton and fabric and textile in India by the British, part of Gandhi's platform for self-determination was getting that industry back and was spinning, and he spun
And
every
those little
day.
portable, those,
Yeah, and
they're
the
amazing.
truck
Yeah,
take
they're brilliant,
for at
portable.
least an hour a day, and um, oh gosh, now I went off why I was even starting on the Gandhi thing. Spinners. Um,
So
no,
the woman in Wisconsin, the war
oh,
photographer.
so there's a famous picture of Gandhi
Yeah.
spinning that was in the Times recently for the 75th anniversary of what was this? It was something, and the woman who took that picture has this I went, I was writing about Gandhi and I went down the rabbit hole of that and I had her in and then I took her out. This woman who took that picture was one of the first women allowed, or maybe the first woman work photographer in combat. To take pictures in combat. She was also the first American photographer that Stalin allowed in to see, the new industry in the USSR. She was also the woman who took the first cover of Life magazine of the big dam. I mean, she was like, and then she went to India, and she was this incredible pioneering
Wow.
woman. And so this picture has this whole backstory, and I wrote like several pages about it, and then it was just a little too far afield, and I ended up taking it out. But that happens. But it was a very interesting kind of side story to you just find all this stuff is the thing. You start
You
looking and you find all this stuff.
we are a rich onion, our craft. And I did actually wonder. I know it's like not a picture book, but I did wonder. Sometimes there's books that have like the little section right in the middle of pictures, and I did kind of,
Why I
I
did
I
yeah.
kind of picked it up, and immediately all I did was look at there, and I looked for the dark bit there, and I thought, oh,
So a couple reasons for that. One was I and my
I mean, we
husband,
get these in the back, but
yeah, my husband Steven, who's a documentary filmmaker, was like, "You should let me take pictures." And I don't, it was lockdown and everything, and I was kind of depressed the whole time. I was also doing this when I mean, as we all were, and I just didn't. I don't like pictures of myself. I just didn't have the energy, and I knew I should have, and I didn't. It was really
it
just a failure on my
my
part.
in my mind's brain of what the pictures would be, because as a knitter, no one cares about this
Yeah,
situation here. This is not of any interest. I
right.
thought it would all be like hands in
Yeah,
dye
should
pots
have been.
and pictures of, because couldn't care less about this situation.
I wanted actually illustrations, little illustrations. There are some little illustrations that my daughter did.
Your
But
daughter did those?
yeah, there's a little credit for her in the beginning, but you don't really see it. I feel bad that that's not more apparent. All those little drawings my daughter did. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love the little drawings. I didn't know that. I guess I should have read. I should
Well, it's on the copyright page,
I read the acknowledgments. Like the
I
little
should have put it in the acknowledgments too. Yeah,
poems.
yeah. She did the little pen drawings, and I love the little ball of yarn that's used in between every section, and
Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, it was really sweet, but I wanted little drawings, like, sort of like in the if you've read, Salt, Fat, Heat, Acid,
My husband's obsessed with that book.
the order is. Wendy McNaughton did these beautiful drawings.
Yeah.
Wendy's way too busy, but, I kept saying, "Let's do drawings, let's do drawings, let's do drawings," and they kept saying, "Yeah, that's a good idea," and then by the time I turned in, I was like, "Okay, the drawings," and they said, "Yeah, no, it's too late for that and also really expensive, and you would have to pay for it out of pocket and,
The page
yourself."
count.
Yeah, and so I thought, "Oh god, I'm so bummed out about that." And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, "There's gotta be some woman I can find who can do these drawings, who's in a position in life where I wouldn't have to pay too much for them." And I'm, like, racking my brain, and then one day my daughter walks by and I went, "Oh, her." Um, 'Cause again, the documentary filmmaker husband is also an artist, and, you can sort of see some of his stuff back there, and, uh
Mm.
and she is too. I'm not at all. I can't draw my way out of a paper bag, but she's a really it's not her she's not that's not her life path, but she loves art and drawing, and she's good at it, so,
I really do love them,
anyway,
and actually,
her thing I said, "Would you do these drawings for my book days?" And she said, "What are you gonna pay me?" So, she drove a hard bargain.
that's
Yeah, isn't that a good
amazing.
one? That's a little shorn
I
sheep.
love that one. And I also love, I mean, if you, for those of you out there in Radioland, for those of you who haven't read it yet, what's important to see is it's a little patchy.
It's a little
It's
patchy,
not
and
perfectly
she's
showing.
like, "Whoa, dude, who gave me this bad haircut?"
Yeah, there's a face,
Yeah,
and there's just little. I loved the fact that it was kind of a hot mess,
yeah,
not a beautifully shorn.
yeah.
But what I was going to say, that's so funny that it's your daughter, because what I was going to say about the photographs is, at first I kind of wanted the photographs, but then the whole vibe of the book and the whole vibe of this, we pick up sticks and strings and we make a thing and we're like superheroes and it's the same throughout time. The drawings I felt were more true to the overall the overall vibe of the timelessness of the story that it was telling.
Yeah.
So here I thought that was purposeful.
No, I mean, I did want drawings. I totally did. Um, but I had imagined them as being exact I had Wendy in my head and the things from Salt, Fat, whatever that is, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat,
Yeah.
I don't know the order, but you know what I mean. Um, yeah, this was, like everything in the book, it was both very homemade in my home, and kind of looking around and going, "What can I do? How can I do this?" And it worked.
So
But
you
they
kind of
I couldn't do
already.
color drawings because of that either. They wouldn't let me do color drawings.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
It's
like
fine.
the
Yeah.
black and white though.
They were
Yeah.
Y'all can look at them out there. You can see what you think.
So you kind of already answered this in our waning moments before, oh my God, I have to do a light edit and get this thing up by 2. um, I think you sort of already answered this, which is I was going to say, which of the things in the crafting journey between the shearing and the spinning and the dyeing and the designing and the knitting would be the thing that you kept in your life, in your repertoire?
Well, obviously, I mean, I feel like it's unfair to say knitting because
I know.
it's
Let's
already
take that out of the equation because
so let's take that
that's
one
not a
out. Let's
kept,
take
that's
it
an
out.
already there.
Um, I mean, I think I would I mean, I have my top now. I really did love spinning. I really did find it to be very meditative and fun. But I also, I mean, I like and I still have dye. I really liked dyeing. I think I probably but it's also dyeing is a lot messier, you have to have dedicated pots and
Yeah.
sometimes, you don't wanna do it in your house necessarily because of so it's a little, it's a little more of a to-do
Yeah.
to I've got a spinning wheel that I like, so I can spin, so I imagine I'll keep spinning, but I do sometimes, think about, um I mean, the dye was so fun, and I had to really control myself at one point. I just felt like, "Uh-oh, I'm gonna write a whole book about color," and I really felt like it would be so easy to do, to have it just completely I kept it to 2 chapters, but
It's amazing.
like 6 chapters on color as a cultural construct and
Yeah,
how the colors came to be and the ways that empires rose and fell, and again, the history of the world through color, up to the point where I felt like when they invented the guy, the 19-year-old who
yeah,
invented dye, chemical dye, petroleum-based dye, um, was like Steve Jobs, or I mean, it was like that.
yeah.
It was like a moment where that technology came. He didn't even realize what he had done, and within
Everything changed.
15 years, everything was different.
You next time you're in New York, you have to go to the Brooklyn Museum and see their exhibit Blue.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous exhibit. I think they made it permanent. I think it's permanent now. I'll check next time I go. It's just down the
And it
street from my
was
house. It's a great
for
museum.
me, I have to say, maybe because it was not I mean, it was about fiber, but it was also about something other, um, where I dropped my internal monologue about how bad I was at all this stuff and let myself
Right,
recognize that that was kind of the point, that the beginner's mind and being
right.
the amateur and learning to and I mean, I don't know if this is at all true for you, but sometimes for me as somebody who does something creative for a living, because you have to be concerned with selling it, with marketing, with, all these commerce issues, it can erode some of that joy and it can sort of affect and shape and sometimes that's motivating, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it
Yeah,
takes it away. And so to have something where I went just to the process is the thing. And that's why, if it comes out being the ugliest sweater in the world, that's okay because what the point is what I'm learning along the way. And not just going, ugh, this sucks or isn't
right.
any good. Um, that was a real gift. That was a real gift.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the core of my book is that um, uh, I always say in class, everyone's known a knitter who picks up the needles and they're just pretty good right away. Like without a lot of effort, they're pretty good. And I say, without a lot of intellectual curiosity, guess what they'll stay? Pretty good. Stay pretty
Uh-huh.
good. You know where greatness is? It's the other side of the coin of I suck.
Yeah.
So I always say in class, dare to suck
Yeah.
because that's where greatness comes. Because then you got to figure, I'm a self-taught knitter. That's what my book is about, is
Yeah.
making a giant hot mess on your needles, not having the internet to go to, not having YouTube to go to. YouTube is a beautiful and terrible thing. Now knitters are watching and matching, watching and matching,
Yeah.
watching and matching. That's not learning. That's not learning. It's
Yeah.
not learning.
But even I was looking at something about Instarsha and I was like, Instarsha, and then I was reading sort of about it and it was like, oh, that's what my mom used to say, knitting with 2 colors.
Oh, Intarsia.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's how this is Peggy, this is how you knit with 2 colors.
Yeah.
I didn't need a name and a YouTube video for
Right.
that. I needed my
Yeah.
mom going, "This is what you do," and then you go. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's so true, and it is. I mean, I love your book, and I have to say,
Oh,
I'm a fangirl a minute. I do, and I love that it is a good friend. Um,
oh.
I think that's it's a comforting companion and a good friend, and it allows you to not feel it allows you to feel like you can love your process, and that is really and that's what I love personally. I mean, I still love that about knitting. I the other day I had something I was knitting a sweater and somehow because I think as I was watching a movie with subtitles, um, I got I got a stitch off the pattern and I didn't really notice for a while and
Oh.
I had to frog back inches of what I did because it was a little smishy, and so it took me like I didn't. I looked and I thought, "Is something wrong?" And I thought, "Oh no, it's fine." And then I kept going, and you know, I had that moment of thinking, "Well, maybe nobody will notice," and I thought, nah, "Got to do it." But also that's I always think unknitting. It's unknitting.
Yeah.
It's part of knitting is unknitting. Part of knitting is I don't even care that I mean, I do care. I'd like to have something that I especially blankets I'm into right now, but I like to have something that's useful and beautiful, but I also just like doing it. I just like
Yeah.
doing it.
Oh, yeah. I say the ripping just means we get to knit more,
Yeah.
and
It's just more
you're
knitting.
always
I
happier
love
the
it.
second time.
Yeah.
I'm
So
always I'm always happier
'cause
with
you
the
know how to
second
do it
time.
the second
Yeah.
time. Doing it right. And so I don't I do feel in my life that that is one of the joys I get from knitting is that I am not that. I like to have something nice, but sometimes, and it, sometimes, or you get something like the other thing I was doing during the pandemic was, I knit 3 blankets, and one of them was, yeah, was kind of a complicated one. Um, and it was the one that I was knitting during the most of lockdown. And, and I got this really weird superstitious thing where it was mirroring the progress of the vaccine. Like, I would make a mistake and suddenly the vaccine, like, backtracked, something happened, and then I would get back into it and it would be moving forward. And then I almost finished the blanket right before the election in 2020, and then I realized that if I did, they were getting close on the vaccine, that the vaccine would get there before the election, and that would look good for Trump, so I better not do that. So I put the blanket down.
You understand this is your father's walker, yes?
Yeah,
Are you
well,
are you seeing that connection?
well, and yet, when did the vaccine finally
Okay,
get
this is your father's
when
walker.
I finished my blanket. But at any rate, that was sort of I kept putting that in the book too and realizing I sounded crazy, so I didn't. But but
You don't
nonetheless,
sound
this
a
all
little crazy.
happened and I finished this blanket and I thought, I don't want this blanket. It will remind me of the worst part of the pandemic forever. I don't want it in my house. So I gave it to a girlfriend, um, who and this is one of the amazing powers of knitting. It transformed that blanket from something that reminded me of a source of pain to something that was an act of love. And that blanket means so much to her. She says when she's sad, when she's having a hard time, she wraps herself, she calls it blanket. She said, I wrapped myself in blanket today because blanket, I know blanket is love to me, because I gave her blanket. And what an amazing, so that's the power of knitting too.
It's
And I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. This might be something I'm not supposed to know, but let's just say
okay.
somebody at the Times told me
Yes.
that that piece that we started this talking about that
Yes, yes.
was, if you're a Times subscriber, you can gift an
Yes.
article to non-subscribers.
Yeah.
That piece is the most gifted article for 3 weeks, which is unprecedented. And I said, it's part of,
I'm
I
not
mean,
surprised.
it's partly somebody wrote about it, but it's also knitter's gift.
I'm
It's
not
part
at all
of
surprised.
extension of gifting what we make, it's that act of love. So I wasn't at all surprised I mean, I was
Yeah.
excited. I wasn't surprised.
The blank it's so interesting how
But don't tell the Times I told you that.
I won't.
Yeah.
And no one will see it. It's just, a couple
Yeah.
thousand. Um, the memory of stitches, that they lock in our memories as we knit them. I had a woman write to me for MDK, and this was a few years ago, about she a project that she was knitting while visiting her mother in the hospital. And I'm trying to remember the letter. I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember whether it's that the mother died or that she came through. But because that wasn't really the point. It was that she was frightened that uh, those memories were locked in the stitches, and she would not be able to enjoy this piece. And what should she do? And I basically, it wasn't a cop out. I said, first of all, put it away for a little bit, and when you'll know when you see it. But here's the thing: there are more memories than you think that are trapped in those stitches. So there's also the memory of the comfort that knitting actually gave you during a difficult time. Because I worked on when I served on the grand jury, which it was pretty much one of the most traumatic things I've ever done, because the grand jury in Kings County is the busiest grand jury in the country. And what we're hearing, we're doing 9, 10, 12 cases a day. It's just brutal, just brutal. A lot of bad things happening to kids. There's a lot of abuse. It's just sometimes kids testified, and I had to hold that gaze, because if
Yeah.
that 12-year-old was brave enough to sit on that stand and tell the stories that she was going to tell, I
Absolutely.
was not going to
They
look away.
gotta be there.
So I was going to be there for her. And so I was afraid that I chose clapotee. I chose the clap, the thing that I had been avoiding for all those years, because, like, I'm not going to knit a clapotee. Everyone does it, but it was simple enough and I was afraid that every time I put it on, I would I would feel all of that. But what I felt was the that the knitting sustained me. What was locked into the stitches was the comfort those stitches gave me.
Interesting.
So I find that whole I find the memory of stitches really fascinating because I
Yeah.
can always this was my COVID sweater. Well, what I'm wearing is
Uh-huh.
this was a knit along that was a video sweater class that was going to launch, and I started it before COVID, but I finished it during COVID, and we did the entire video sweater class during lockdown.
Uh-huh.
And I every time I put on a garment, this was called the Sarvanese cardigan. I knit it because I wanted a big hug. I felt this town was taking care of me. Every garment you put on, I I'm right back to wherever I was when I worked on it.
Yeah.
They're knit right into the stitches.
One of my great sources of sorrow, I had, well, I still have one sweater that my mom made for Daisy when Daisy was 3 or 4. I think I posted something on it. But in my old house, we moved a couple years ago. We moved in 2021. We had when we moved in, there was a moth infestation,
Yeah.
and all my sweaters that I knit, but also all my sweaters my mom knit were wrecked, and I had
Oh,
to. So I have nothing except this one sweater that she made for which was the last thing she made for anybody. And I think, although she was in her 70s, but I think my mom had Parkinson's eventually, and she didn't then, and there was no sign of it. But I think it's not her. Let's just say it's not. My mom could knit very, very well, and the stitches are uneven, and I think she already was. I don't think she knew it yet, but I think that she had Parkinson's at that point. But she did make this last sweater for my daughter that I treasure. But yeah, I mean, I think constantly about sweaters lost is what I think about, like all my sweaters that I don't have anymore.
yeah. Nothing will get a room full of complete strangers who are knitters to
Yeah,
immediately go,
I know,
then the
moths.
M word.
I know. And if you live
This
in California, because of
oh,
the climate here, it's very hard to get rid. They don't, there's
oh, it's
no.
hard to get rid of them everywhere. It's hard to
I
get
guess
rid of
it's
them here.
I
Cold
just
is
stopped. I mean, what I did after that was I put all my wool stuff in the garage, or it's not but what we've turned
yeah.
it.
My
But
stuff's in these airtight plastic bins.
yeah, you just
Um,
gotta not do that. But that was a very sad, hard, and awful lesson.
Container store sweater
Yeah,
bins, large sweater bins. They're really good. This is a nightmare because it is. I have 5 minutes to lightly edit this and get this up. And and it's because we talked so much before we even
I know. We
record,
just had such a good
because
time.
I literally could talk to you forever. Same thing happened when this has happened a couple of times where uh I had a live, I think, with Kate Atherley go like 2 hours. We were talking about pattern writing, and we just went, and Clara Parks was on forever. And yeah, this happens from time to
It's
time.
pair bonded. What can you do?
Now, why do you live in California?
Why do you live in New York? No, we will meet. I used to come to New York a lot more, but everything's on Zoom and nobody travels. But
Yeah, but
okay,
now we're traveling again.
yeah,
So you
I
should
know.
get on
But
a
nobody.
plane.
I will. I will. I have. Yeah. I mean, one of the things is that now that I was going to Minneapolis all the time because of my dad, and that was
Yeah.
basically, and now I'm not, which is weird, but it does give me more room to go
All
elsewhere.
right. Well, here's what I have to say to you in the waning 2 minutes before I have to get this up. Okay. So first of all, everyone out there, if you haven't already heard it, for God's sakes, go buy Unraveling. Um, you and I, we're the valedictorians. What's the second one? The salute.
Salutatorian.
Yeah, you and I go back and forth, number one and number two slot in our
Oh, is that
category.
right?
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
here's the thing. We're number one and number two. We go back and forth, back and forth. We keep switching places in the category of knitting. Why? I don't count who's actually number one. It's a crochet animal book.
Oh,
So really we go back and forth between number two and number three in our category, but I don't count that
yeah,
because
that's not.
for some reason Amazon lets crochet books be in the knitting category and the crochet category, and knitting's only in the knitting category. So there's this knitted crochet animal book that's been number one in the knitting category for like years. Makes me crazy. But anyway, yeah, you and
All
I
right.
go back and forth. So now I'm just bumping myself off the
Ah,
uh,
you'll get it. It'll go.
to go by this. And the last thing I'm going to say to you, Rhinebeck Sheep and Wool, I better see you. You're coming to Rhinebeck Sheep and Wool. We're going to talk. I'm going to connect you to, you're going to love the woman that runs Merritt Books. She's a nice
I'm
Jewish woman
sure. I
like
have
us.
no doubt. I
She's
have no
amazeballs, and wow, does she treat authors great. And it's just a beautifully run area. And if you think, if you ever have that feeling in your gut of like, oh, does anyone buy books anymore? This will make your life, this will bring tears to your eyes looking at this jam-packed tent full of people grabbing books off the table, walking to checkout with a stack of books this high,
Alright.
and make you cry, and make you cry with joy.
Well,
And they're sheep.
you said the magic word.
I mean, I'm just saying. Oh my God, I could talk to you all day, and this is supposed to go live in 120 seconds. So
Okay.
thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you so
you,
much for
Patty.
rescheduling. I so appreciate it. And
You
oh my God, just
okay.
thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.